governments in the short term. This is the economic cycle at the medium level. This is the economic cycle. This is mentioned in the Holy Quran by Prophet Joseph when he said, you'll go through a period of a cycle of 7 years of hardship and drought, followed by 7 years of productivity. So therefore, we see this cycle manifesting itself in different phases and different phases. And in the first phase, we notice that the public finance policies is the one that manages and controls the rest of the economic cycle, although it's only part of a whole. And there is a defect in our understanding of this process, and this is consequently one of the main reasons for our failure, because we lack the deep understanding for the cycle of business and the economic cycle in the short, medium, and long terms. This slide shows the relationship between government, society, and companies. And the government really manages the relationship between society and communities and the companies. The society people always look for better living standards, for security, and they can be native citizens, they can be expat community members, because of the dominance of the public finance policies, and therefore the government determines all of these roles, and this leads to the a rather a retreat in the role of the economy, because in the community, because most of our economies rely, or all of our economies rely mostly on the rentier economy, the revenues from oil and gas, and this has impacted the social contract between the government and the governed. And in our social contract, in Oman, for example, we have the Oman National Vision 2040, which requires the private sector companies from moving from rentier consumer economy to a more productive economy. This will not be an easy transfer. This requires a change in the attitudes and the culture, the business culture, the society's attitude and culture, investing more in the private sector, entrepreneurship, and the private sector should realize its role. And as we said, 85% of the workforce is of lower skilled section. And I'm sure that the challenges we face in Oman are one and the same in other Gulf countries. For this reason, creating any economic diversification should focus on these three main issues. There are many other side issues, but by and large, the three main reasons are the ones, and that is in our failure in managing the business cycle from where we produce to where we export, and also the failure in the economic cycle, and also the policies governing the relationship between government and society and companies. And of course, creating a balance in this relationship between government, society, and companies. As we said, these are not easy tasks, but thankfully we have achieved a degree of success, and also because of the pandemic and the lower oil prices have led to more investment in the infrastructure on the road system, educational system, and also now there is more of an opportunity to push forward economic diversification through direct foreign investment. And I'm sure that in the Gulf countries, we all share the interest in the necessity of moving to a new phase. Of course, this will not come easy. It requires a change in the attitudes, in the culture, some boldness in the proposals, and not complacency and using to like just painkillers. We need some deep surgical excisions and interventions, and we should not allow one economic policy to be dominant over the other three. This should be dealt with through a comprehensive vision. And I think in the Gulf countries, there is a degree of readiness for that. We all hope for a better future. Thank you, Dr. Yousuf. And and he focused on Oman, of course, but he also mentioned other Gulf countries. Dr. Sebastian Soms is our next speaker. He is a political analyst on Arab Gulf countries and Middle East, and a researcher at the Center for Applied Research in partnership with Orient, and he will be focusing on the economic diversification in Gulf countries and from also West Asia and the Gulf countries. And Dr. Sebastian Sons will be speaking about the chances for closer European Gulf cooperation in terms of economic transformation. You have 15 minutes, sir.
Thank you very much and good afternoon. And first of all, I would like to thank the organizers for the invitation, as well as all participants for their really insightful inputs. And I have really learned a lot in the last 2 days. And before we forget it, I would also like to thank the translators for doing an amazing job so far. As I was engaged in several research projects in order to identify joint fields of cooperation between the European Union as an institution on the one hand and the Gulf states on the other, I will focus today on this promising but also on the challenging issue. And I would try to combine and also to refer to what all the other or some of the other presenters have outlined and to try to conclude a little bit on what we have discussed in the last couple of days. And please allow me to mention that I'm not an economist, but a political analyst, and therefore I have chosen a slightly different approach in looking into the topic, as I will concentrate on the general strategic approach in the EU-Gulf relationship in order to create a nexus between short-term economic interests and long-term strategic sustainable efforts at the same time. And indeed, as you all know, both the EU and the Gulf states have already established close and trustworthy historical relationships on an institutional, but also on a bilateral level. And this was to some extent outlined by Oliver Oehms yesterday with regards to Germany, for instance. And this is also reflected in the statistics about EU-Gulf trade relations. We have seen a lot of data and statistics today and yesterday, so I will not try to bore you with more tables. but I think there are some outstanding numbers when it comes to EU-Gulf trade. In 2020, the EU was the second largest trade partner for the member countries of the GCC, with 12.3% after China. And in total, the trade volume between the EU and the GCC amounted to 97.1 billion euro in 2020. The focus was on imported fuel and mining products and exported machinery and transport equipment, as well as agriculture and raw materials. And in addition, as we are all aware of, political relations have also been formalized back in 1988 and were further enhanced by several cooperation agreements between the EU and the Gulf states. Today, the External Action Service of the EU runs 3 delegations in Riyadh, Kuwait, and Abu Dhabi. They are tackling all of the GCC countries. And on the other hand, the GCC countries also have their own embassies in Brussels with the EU. However, potential for a comprehensive economic cooperation model between the EU and the Gulf remained untapped so far. And this is due to several political, economic, and social reasons. First, bilateral relations with the US, with China, or specific EU member states, such as Germany or France, have been even more relevant on an economic, but also on a security and political level in comparison to the EU as a multilateral institution. And still, knowledge on both sides about the respective ecosystems, the institutional framework, or the political decision-making is sometimes lacking. And we also have felt it and seen it in the last couple of years. In times of global populism and polarization, perceptions matter, and this also holds true for the EU-Gulf relations. I was involved in one of the EU-funded projects this year to identify joint fields of EU-Gulf cooperation. And on this behalf, I was also conducting a number of expert interviews with different stakeholders from politics, media, and academia in the Gulf states in order to learn and specifically listen more to their assessment of the EU. So does the EU really play a political and economic role in the Gulf states today? What is the general perception of the EU, and in which areas do the interlocutors see potential for closer cooperation, not only in economic terms, but also in political? And finally, 2 main messages have been highlighted by most of my interview partners. First, and this is the positive message, the EU is still considered as a success model in terms of regional integration, economic diversification, or youth empowerment. It offers an outstanding example for peace and prosperity, for inclusion and integration, and also for growth and social cohesion. But, and this is the second and more negative or more critical observation, the image of the EU has tremendously suffered in recent years due to, for instance, internal fragmentation such as the Brexit. And as we in Europe know very well, it is oftentimes extremely difficult to understand the complexity of the European Union as an institutional body with so many different layers of decision-making. Thus, from a Gulf perspective, the EU to some extent seems to remain a black box or a terra incognito. And in addition, it was also criticized that negotiations about an EU-GCC free trade agreement have not been successful yet. It seems rather unclear what kind of business model the EU could currently offer when its own cohesion is fractured. And furthermore, some criticized also the EU's public diplomacy approach towards the Gulf states as too normative and too biased. And from a European perspective, though, similar caveats exist, driven by the internal Gulf rift, which was solved, fortunately, in January this year. The EU considered bilateral relations with each single Gulf state as more reliable than with the GCC as an institution in recent years, specifically during the time of the Gulf rift between 2017 and January this year. But, and this brings me to the current period and to the future perspectives of EU-Gulf cooperation, I think that a new momentum for EU-Gulf cooperation seems likely to occur currently for 2 main reasons. First, the EU as an institution has understood that the Gulf states are not only a relevant political and security regional player, but they are also emerging as a global hub for technical advancement, digital industry, and for a young, quite ambitious generation. We have heard a lot about, during our webinar, about the several obstacles and challenges in terms of job creation, the still overbloated public sector, corruption, and lacking incentives to attract young Gulf nationals to enter the private sector. However, we also discussed that all Gulf states are undergoing a fundamental socioeconomic transformation that is reshaping and reassessing the respective social contracts. Although such a transformation poses fundamental risks and challenges for each Gulf state on different levels, it also offers new ways of cooperation on a regional, national, and international level. And here the EU could and should jump in with more encouragement and commitment than in recent years. The second reason why cooperation with the EU could be more prosperous in the future is related to the geopolitical situation or period the region is going through. There is a tendency that maybe the region could enter a period of conflict fatigue, which is shown by the solution of the Gulf Rift, as I have mentioned before, or also initial direct talks between Iran and Saudi Arabia, which are facilitated by Iraq. And all Gulf states seem to have recognized that only regional stability could preserve their respective business models that have come under severe pressure due to the double shock of a decline in oil prices and the outbreak of COVID-19, combined with still existing long-lasting structural problems we all addressed today and yesterday. The Gulf states are therefore in dire need of foreign investment, which could only be attracted if foreign companies consider the region as stable and secure for business again. In recent years, such an image was undermined by the regional conflicts I've already mentioned, such as the Gulf Rift or rising tensions with Iran, or of course also the UAE's and Saudi Arabia's military engagement in Yemen. But if the region really enters a period of de-escalation, less demonization and polarization, and I don't want to sound naive, this is likely to offer a historical window of opportunity to create inclusive business partnership models and foster regional integration and cooperation with the EU. And based on such a rather positive assessment, this future EU-Gulf cooperation model should be driven by a comprehensive and multidimensional approach, which relates to a nexus of economic interests and social sustainability. And such a nexus addresses firstly the need for energy diversification by promoting sustainable economic solutions, secondly the empowerment of the youth, and thirdly regional entrepreneurship. We have tackled all those issues tremendously yesterday and also today, and therefore the focus of future EU-Gulf economic cooperation should be based specifically on those three E's: energy, empowerment, and entrepreneurship. Starting with energy. Renewable energy, climate change, and environmental issues are discussed more prominently in the public and political discourse in all Gulf states than ever before. And this is also, of course, true in the EU. From an EU perspective, several programs and instruments still exist, which could be combined with ongoing regional initiatives to create synergies in terms of knowledge transfer, R&D, or job creation. For instance, the Green New Deal, which is supported by the European Commission, and the launch of European organizations such as Wind Europe or the Center for Renewable Energy Sources show the dire interest of the EU to establish itself as a global green energy champion. And back in 2010, if you might remember, the EU GCC Clean Energy Technology Network was initiated by focusing on renewable energy sources and energy efficiency. However, the network did not reach its expected results so far, but it could serve as a platform to revive coordination and exchange between the Gulf states and the EU. And in turn, the Gulf states also have introduced several outstanding initiatives to promote green energy as a business model and a catalyst for job creation in the private sector, for instance. Renewable energy features prominently in all Gulf states' development visions, be it the Oman's Vision 2030, Vision 2040, Kuwait's 2035, or the Vision 2030 in Saudi Arabia. And the Green Middle East initiative that was launched or pronounced by Saudi Arabia in March this year also addresses the regional and transboundary challenge of climate change, environmental protection, and alternative energy. Thus, both the EU and the Gulf states are following similar interests to deal with environmental and climate issues, which could generate more fields for future economic cooperation. Second, the EU and the Gulf states could engage more in the field of youth and empowerment and women empowerment by enhancing joint action through development cooperation, for instance. In recent decades, more than 75% of all non-official development assistance was pledged and dispersed by Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Qatar, and the UAE. Today, Gulf states' development policy is undergoing a significant shift away from providing mostly humanitarian aid to more technical assistance in sectors such as education, vocational training, and youth and women empowerment. Furthermore, the 4 Gulf states have become participants of the Development Assistance Committee of the OECD to show more international reliability and a political commitment for multilateral cooperation. Institutions in Qatar, such as Education Above All or Qatar Foundation, the Kuwait Foundation for the Advancement of Science in Kuwait, or Dubai Cares in the UAE, are generally interested to engage more with EU organizations in order to develop and implement joint projects in countries of mutual interest, such as Jordan, Lebanon, Iraq, Palestine, or Tunisia. And furthermore, more multilateral organizations such as the Islamic Development Bank based in Jeddah constitute a potential partner for triangular cooperation between the bank, the EU, and a third country of joint interest in different sectors such as education, health, or capacity development. In order to promote such a triangular cooperation, the ISDB runs the so-called reverse linkage program, which serves as an interesting instrument for closer cooperation with the EU. I was working with the German Development Cooperation Agency, GIZ, for the last 2 years. And in this job, I was explicitly engaged in improving dialogue with Gulf states on development cooperation. And in almost every meeting, all Gulf stakeholders expressed their dire will to engage more with the EU on a more institutional level, which was also shown by the representatives of the EU delegations. So therefore, there is a joint interest specifically in coordinating development policy approaches on a trilateral or also on a multi-institutional level with regards to education, and training. Yeah.
Yeah. I can give you one more minute if you want to wrap up.
That's perfect. Thank you so much. Okay. Finally, entrepreneurship offers another excellent opportunity for enhanced EU-Gulf cooperation, which was shown, for instance, by the EU programs Erasmus for Young Entrepreneurs or the Entrepreneurship Competence Framework. And here, I would also argue that 2 interesting EU projects have been established to develop a more cohesive, a more comprehensive outreach to the Gulf states. The first one is the so-called Enhanced EU-GCC Political Dialogue Cooperation and Outreach Project, which was established this year. And the second one is the so-called EU-GCC Dialogue on Economic Diversification, which was initiated in 2018. However, such a nexus model can only be successful when more exchange formats for critical dialogue will be established, in which European and Gulf stakeholders will be provided with platforms to discuss and define joint interests and overcome respective misunderstandings and misperceptions. As a result, a more pragmatic and demand-driven economic partnership is possible, and therefore I would like to sum up. I think we are entering a good period of a closer cooperation. Thank you very much for your attention. I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you very much, Sebastian, for the excellent presentation and the chances for closer EU-GCC cooperation in terms of the economic transformation. شكرا جزيلا. يعني بقي لدينا شكرا جزيلا لجميع المتحدثين بطبيعة الحال. بقي لدينا.
I'd like to thank all the speakers. We have some time, approximately 20 minutes, for the Q&A session, for comments from the different speakers. And after that, I would like to give the floor to Dr. Hamid Ali to conclude this workshop in a few minutes. I have Dr. Ilyas Khalil, who has a number of observations that he would like to present. I would like to thank all the speakers in this session. I am going to speak in Arabic. My question is to Dr. Ayhab, and my question is about concentrating on export diversification for a state to be able to achieve its objective, which is diversification in general. Dr. Ayhab concentrated on the private sector. He talked about the importance of companies that should play a very important role in this regard. So if these companies are the ones that are going to play such a role, and based on the opportunities available, these companies are going to work within the framework of the current economic system, which is a system that relies on oil and hydrocarbon resources. So diversification is going to remain within the oil and gas sector. So because this is the one that gives more incentives, more profitability. So these are the quick sources of profitability. So I have a question about the points that you talked about yesterday. So we have to differentiate between primary industries and secondary industries. And if we have diversification in the secondary industries, so it doesn't mean that we're going to have diversification, because these are derivatives of the primary industry. So that is why we need to build more primary industries that are separate from the oil sector. And this point is very important. This is a very difficult kind of endeavor that should be undertaken by the private sector. So what is important is to start with something that is new altogether. For instance, something similar to the Silicon Valley or high-tech industries. So here we do not have any comparative advantages when it comes to the GCC countries. So the challenge lies in the fact that perhaps the public sector is the one that would lead the necessary diversification for us to be able to come up with secondary industries that are different from the prevailing primary industries that we have now. Thank you very much, Doctor. So the question was to Dr. Ayhab, but before I give him the floor to answer this question, I do not know whether Dr. Nawaf is still with us, because there is a question to him in particular. So if he is still with us, perhaps I can read the question to him. So if he is not with us, I can postpone the question to a later phase. Dr. Nawaf, are you with us? So it seems that Dr. Nawaf is not with us. We have another question from Christo Ayat, if I am pronouncing the name correctly.
Yeah. And today, a question that hopefully complements your examinations. اللي هو طبعا diversification also requires communication on an international level or international stage. How well did the GCC states do in their public diplomacy, especially in the EU? بعتقد هذا السؤال, this question is perhaps directed to Sebastian. He's talking about public diplomacy concerning the relationship between the GCC and the EU. هعطي الآن المجال لدكتور أيهاب يجاوب على
the floor to Dr. Ayhab to answer this question, and after that we're going to move to Dr. Sebastian, and after that we can listen to more questions. Thank you so much.
شكرا دكتور إلياس. طبعا
Thank you, Dr. Ilyas. Just for purpose of clarification regarding the primary and secondary industries, when we also talk about the export from Qatar and Gulf countries, this is outside the oil. But when we look at the indicators here, we do not see a difference in this index showing that the development degree that is desired. It's true that non-oil exports have increased, but the increase is the result of relying on chemicals, which are basically relying on petrol. So therefore, there is no real diversification as such. And the measures of diversification reflect that there is no increase. There may be an increase in some products, but diversification is not taking place. The point I'm trying to make here is that the private sector without the public sector cannot create an economic revolution and start the diversification process. The role of the public sector should focus for the time being on providing the right incentives for the companies and individuals in order to initiate a real revolution and real change in the economy. The governments are implementing policies and right policies like low volatility, low inflation, macroeconomic policies, also attracting direct foreign investment. But the FDI are here, they are coming to the Gulf countries in Qatar, but only 4% of the FDIs are focused on tradable goods. The rest goes on low value adding sectors, non-tradable like construction and others. So therefore, the role of government is to provide the right incentives, whether to citizens, whether to the public sector. It's because the vast majority of people prefer to work for the public sector because the risks are less and the benefits are more guaranteed. So therefore, something should be done, like unemployment benefits or something, to help the private sector, and governments should focus more on providing these right incentives. Thank you, Dr. Ayhab. Sebastian,
GCC countries and developing relationship with the EU?
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. Of course, it's a very relevant topic, and I would argue that there are two different layers when it comes to public diplomacy of the Gulf states in the EU or in Europe. The first one is related to the EU as an institution. And as I tried to lay out, this is, of course, to some extent in an initial phase from both sides. So, of course, there are discussions going on between the specific Gulf states and the EU, respective EU institutions, when it comes to political issues, regional security, economic diversification, migration management, etc. But there is no cohesive strategy. And I think this is what both sides are lacking so far. There have been also more significance of specific member states of the EU when it comes to economic partnerships, such as France, such as Germany, Italy, of course also the UK. All of them have established very close relations to the Gulf states, also with regards to the historical perspective. And this is what the EU is lacking. And on a global level, international partners such as the US are, of course, much more important than the EU in the past. So therefore, it is needed to establish more platforms for communication, for exchange, and not only with regards to bringing academics together and discussing academic issues, but also to have a more interdisciplinary stakeholders group from academia, from economy, from the private business, and from politics, in order to discuss how a new or a different EU Gulf cooperation could look like. And I think there are so many entry points. I have laid out some of them, but there are even more. Migration, for instance, we have tackled labor migration, nationalization issues today and yesterday so often because it is extremely relevant for the Gulf states, but it's also relevant for the EU. So therefore, of course, there is a different situation in the EU or in Europe and in comparison to the Gulf states. But migration matters in both areas. So therefore, to find ways to communicate and ways to exchange is, I think, much more important than in the past. And as I said, this period of time offers a great opportunity to establish closer networks, and I think our webinar is, of course, one starting point, and we should continue doing similar things. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sebastian. دكتور يوسف في عندك شيء انت كنت كأن حاب تضيفه؟
Yousuf, I think you had something you wanted to add, maybe. Please go ahead. I just wanted to make a small intervention to what Dr. Ayhab has said and Mr. Adham regarding the role of the companies and businesses in diversifying experts. We know companies are like individuals. They are rentier based. The challenge facing the Gulf countries in changing this paradigm from rentier individuals, rentier companies, rentier economies into more innovative entities capable of creating breakthroughs into the global markets. His Excellency Mr. Adham has said that, and all our Gulf countries face similar challenges. And the Gulf countries created millions of job opportunities, but they by and large went to foreign workers. So the challenge is how to change these companies from rentier companies relying on low-skilled workers to more innovative companies able to contribute to diversification. Dr. Adham, excuse me, Dr. Ayhab, I'm speaking before you. I think we in the Gulf countries need what's called disruption. When I talked about the ITC sector and textiles, although it was a small shock, but the companies which are used to certain business models, government's contribution here is important, and we're talking medium term here, and also for especially small companies which have more resilience and more flexibility, and they can rely more on local talent, as well as, of course, relying on talents from abroad. But I must say the experience is a mixed basket. Some countries are very successful, like the UAE, for example, and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia to a certain extent, but compared to other countries like Jordan and Lebanon, we are way behind. والسبب إننا
في الأردن وفي لبنان وفي مصر كذلك.
Jordan and Lebanon
المحلية والإقليمية. I think الشركات والموديل الحالي business model needs to be disrupted, and it's not going to be disrupted by regulation alone or by forcefully forcing it. Disruption comes from the smaller entities that will start to eat up in some, but على المدى المتوسط وليس في المدى القصير. تفضل
This is
دكتور.
on the short term. Thank you, Dr. Adham. I don't have much to add, and thank you, Dr. Yousuf and Dr. Adham. They both summarized our entire proceedings in this workshop and the necessity of making this structural change. The idea I always focus on, we are not asking people to go towards activities which are more productive, but we should create the right environment to incite them to do better so that the companies themselves decide for themselves to make this risk-taking behavior. So if I want to simplify this, when we talked about foreign investments, the state does not direct these investments. They open the door for them, and the foreign investor decided to invest in certain sectors because of the larger margin of profitability, because there are more contracts with the government, with the states, there is high productivity, etc. They approach these sectors who do not require highly skilled workers. They can use low skilled workers. So therefore, they are more willing to invest in these sectors. As for when we talk about the competitive advantage, for example, this is a dynamic notion and is more reliant on entrepreneurs, risk takers, startups, the young generation. So we must, maybe we can learn from Canada's experience and how they manage to attract skilled workers, not only attract them, but also convince them of investing in the country long term. If you have an innovative idea, then you are invited to invest. This, of course, requires creating the conducive environment for that, to encourage people to take the risk, to open new companies and benefit from this. Otherwise, they will choose the easy option. They will choose to invest in already existing sectors which are very profitable, but they do not result in diversification. Thank you very much, Dr. Ayhab. And we thank all our colleagues, all our participants, and all the important ideas, their response to the questions, and the food for thought they provided us with. We have only a few minutes left. I'll give them to Dr. Hamid Ali, the Dean of the college, to conclude this workshop.
Dr. Hamid, إذا سمحت.
شكرا جزيلا. شكرا دكتور مروان قبلان.
Thank you, Dr. Nawaf. شكرا جزيلا.
Days that are very productive days. We brought 3 institutions together. We brought our colleagues from Germany, regional program for Gulf State, CONAR. We brought our colleagues from the Arab Center for Research and Policy, and also the Doha Institute, School of Public Administration and Development Economics. And again, let me single out a great person that who was instrumental on all this, and he was sitting behind the scene. Dr. Muhammad Yaga he did a tremendous work to put up all these platforms. And also our colleagues, Dr. Haider Saeed, was so instrumental. He made it so easy, and he did everything. Actually, I was just watching, and I was not even able to correct anything that he suggested. All was brilliantly planned. Also, we are going to thank Fabian Bloomberg for these innovative ideas. That is, we come together, and also for the DI president, who said this is a good opportunity to cooperate and bring in our colleagues. And we're so pleased to see our colleagues, brilliant people from our neighbors. Oman, we have Dr. Adham Said, we have Haitham yesterday. Also today we have Dr. Yousuf, and we are so pleased to have our European partners and Fabian and Frank yesterday. It was tremendous contribution by all sides to the debate. And also I'm so pleased to see that as our colleagues and the economists are not fighting at all. And I thought that there would be a lot of fighting among the economists. They would never agree on anything. But apparently we are all agreeing it in a very mutually, because we are all looking for a common solution. And the economic diversification has opened up a new frontiers. And also we brought good minds. We have a good colleagues, and we can't put somebody better than Dr. Ayhab to speak about the economic diversification in the Gulf, because he has made it a lot of progress in that area. Even though he's writing from that new classical perspective, that is, we might disagree with him sometimes, but he's always putting it brilliantly. So now we have basically come to the conclusion that is, we open up, this is a platform, this was just warming up for what's going to come next. Because we were thinking about making a bigger conference, but we said before we do the conference, let us run something that is opening up the debate. So the diversification, economic diversification has raised a lot of issues, very important issues. And also we bring a group of colleagues that were never been together except for this event. And now we have met with a lot of good friends from Kuwait, because we had, yesterday we have nice female that are brilliantly put the stories of Kuwait. And also we have our colleagues from Oman, and also our partners at the European Union. So I think we are going to plan for something for the future. Meanwhile, I will give 2 minutes for our colleagues. Dr. Haider Said, go ahead.
شكرا دكتور حامد.
Thank you, Dr. Hamid.
أود أن أشكر
I too would like to thank, let me start by thank the two colleagues who moderated the session, Dr. Marwan today and Dr. Frank yesterday, for their excellent moderation. Also, I would like to thank our Konrad Dinawar and the Doha Institute and Dr. Fabian Bloomberg and Dr. Muhammad Yaghi and Dr. Hamid Ali, who also, his role was much bigger than what he said. In fact, whether to do with the ideas or the coordination or the meetings we held and to organize this event, which I think if we can judge it by the reactions and the feedback, it seems that it was an excellent effort by all the participants, and we had a very good level of followers and participation through the Zoom application and the Facebook and other social media outlets.
وأنا يعني يوم أمس تداولت هذه الفكرة سريعا.
Yesterday, I alluded briefly to this. If you allow me, please, to suggest that the papers which were presented in this workshop should be published in one of the peer-reviewed journals, whether in the Journal of Public Policy or Arab studies, which is concerned with political studies, or other journals. Although we have some literature available from before, but the problems and the issues are still persistent. And I think we will be in touch with our partners and the panelists to see what is the best way to do this, either by publishing the papers or maybe make up for any, maybe take a larger number of participants from the Gulf countries, because not all Gulf countries took part, or maybe focus on certain themes. Like, for example, my own personal background, can, like, somebody posed the question, can we talk about a unified vision by Gulf countries on economic diversification, or should it be left to the individual countries? And of course, these issues and others mentioned by Dr. Hamid, and the idea of organizing a conference. And because I think this this workshop was successful, and it is the first time we collaborate with Conrad Dinawar, and this is, of course, Conrad Dinawar of Adinwar. Mr. Fabian, please, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, Haider. Thank you very much, Hamid, colleagues and friends. I would like to keep it short. A big thank you to all moderators, to all the translators, to all the speakers. I think that these 2 days have shown us that there is a lot of knowledge, ideas, concepts out there when it comes to economic diversification, and that there is both. Yes, there are challenges, but also a lot of opportunities, and remarkable transformation processes are already underway. I would say these are processes that especially target, as we heard, among others, supporting SMEs and entrepreneurs, the private-public sector partnership, increasing women and youth participation in the economy. And these are processes that, as was pointed out yesterday, but also today, can and should be also supported somehow, for example, by European countries and by Germany. And my impression is also that there is a momentum at the Gulf, but also in Germany, when it comes to the need to prepare the economies for the future, especially for the future after the global pandemic, and that we can learn from each other also in this regard. So as Konrad Adenauer Stiftung, we will continue to deliver platforms for this, let's say, joint learning efforts. And as already said, for example, by beginning to organize a follow-up conference on this topic jointly with the Arab Center and the Doha Institute. And I hope that we can meet all then in person. Thanks again very much for joining, and have a lovely day. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Fabian. And also I will reiterate what Dr. Haider has just raised, the opportunity to publish a product. That is very important. And hopefully we'll take that opportunity. And Dr. Haider, they are instrumental in these things, and he can contact the authors or contact you individually. But at the end of the day, it will be good that to bring collective mind of a similar mind that is just having same objective and the same theme. And hopefully also we can expand the scope. And that's true, because for some reason people could not make it for the short notes. But this is come to a conclusion of the 2 brilliant days, and we can be thankful for you for all this effort. And I hope that you are going to enjoy the rest of the days. I'm here in Texas, of course. I wake up very early in the morning. Today I woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning and thought that it's 12 o'clock, and then I realized that it is a little bit late. So I couldn't go back to sleep. So I might go and take a sleep, but thank you so much. And have a wonderful day, and we'll keep in contact, and let's have this network to progress and do more things for this region. And thank you so much.
شكرا جزيلا. شكرا إلى اللقاء.
شكرا. Bye bye.